Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Game Informer one-off video. These are becoming all too common these days, but I am Alex Stadnick. I'm one of the video editors here, and today we are reacting to another bombshell case of acquisition here. Sony has bought Bungie, famed first-person shooter developer, a little series named Halo, little series named Destiny. I'm sure you're familiar. But before we get into it, let's introduce the panel. Jill Grote in the building. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, ready to talk about wild news.
Yeah, for real. And then probably the biggest Bungie fan I know, definitely the biggest Destiny fan I know, but Matt Miller in the building. Hello, sir.
Hey, how's it going?
It is good. How are you doing?
Good.
Good.
Surprised. But weirdly not surprised, right? Like surprised that it was this particular piece of news, but like it felt like since the big news with Microsoft Activision, I was waiting for a counter blow from Sony. And
Yep.
This is at least it's nowhere near the same scale as purchase of Activision Blizzard, either in terms of actual money or in implications for the industry, but it's still a big deal. And it's a way for Sony to say, like, hey, just so you know, we're still top dog.
We like money too. Like we're gonna, yeah. Yeah. But let's get into it here. So I saw the news break from gamesindustry.biz from Brendan Sinclair. He says, Sony Interactive Entertainment today announced a deal to acquire Bungie for $3.6 billion, the latest in a string of big ticket consolidation deals in the games industries. As we've kind of talked about already in this video, it's, this feels very in line with what Sony did last year as well, but we can talk about that some more. After the deal closes, Bungie will be an independent subsidiary of SIE run by a board of directors consisting of current CEO and chairman Pete Parsons and the rest of the studio's current management team. Sony has said Bungie will remain a multi-platform studio with the option to self-publish and reach players whenever they choose. So that's the gamesindustry.biz article. Bungie themselves actually has a piece up on their site. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they also have an interesting FAQ and graphic kind of like going over the pillars that they wanted to hit on. So I don't have to remind you two, but Bungie was a part of Activision not too long ago and secured their independence to self-publish and do that. And now they're owned by Sony. The studio that created Halo is owned by PlayStation. I literally don't understand what life is sometimes.
Yeah, and you're right. Like even before the Activision relationship, there was the Microsoft relationship, right? I mean, video games are a really big industry, but they're also a really small industry in some ways, right? Yeah. These relationships are constantly shifting all the time. But as a general trend, I think you can count this as part of a really remarkable streak of consolidation that's going on right now.
Yeah,
I mean, remarkable. That's the big story, right? Above and beyond this particular thing. Anybody who cares about industry happenings should understand that this is the big players are making big moves and consolidating what is already a multi-billion dollar investments in the future, and trying to prove that they can play with the big folks, right?
Well, it's kind of what we talked about last week or two whenever Microsoft made its deal. It's like, this is the arms race now, right? Now Sony is like, because this deal didn't happen within a week, right? Like I'm sure this was something that was building, right? And Matt, you made a good point earlier before we started recording that it probably sped things up. You would, right?
I would think so. I mean, there was some aftershock news to the Microsoft Activision Blizzard purchase that Sony stock took a hit, right? And that wasn't surprising, but even in Microsoft's own internal communications about that purchase, they were still, after the merger completes, the Activision Blizzard thing completes, they were still expecting to be the third biggest behind Tencent and Sony. So it wasn't like Sony was suddenly, oh my gosh, we're being completely crushed. It was that Microsoft made a really big play and brought themselves up yet another step in terms of competitive strength.
Mhm.
And that doesn't matter how big you are, that hurt Sony. It hurt perception of Sony.
Yeah.
Um, if, as you say, it certainly is like there's no way that this whole deal came together in the space of time between then and now. There
Mhm.
had to have been conversations happening for years, probably, between Sony and Bungie, or maybe it was between Bungie and multiple interested parties. That like, hey, we are open to acquisition. I don't know. We don't. Uh, we're not in the room where it happens, so to speak.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
don't know the exact details, but I do know that a lot of times these things take a long time to come together.
Mhm.
And they maybe had a schedule of when those announcements were going to happen that they moved up.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
And to yeah, go for it.
oh, jumping on the idea of perception too. That's one of the things that's interesting to me for this particular announcement because I think like a lot of people, the initial like, oh wow, Bungie, Sony, that's amazing. But like we sort of alluded to earlier, this is not of the same magnitude of the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition. So it is sort of like I feel a little disappointed in this
The news?
news
Yeah.
because it feels sort of reactionary. It feels sort of like even though they must have been speaking for years and doing things, it feels like okay, Sony did what Microsoft did, but a little bit less.
Mhm.
A
And
lot of
I
it less,
feel
right?
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's another conversation too that we've been having regarding the Spartacus, whatever that is, possibly being Game Pass, but not quite as Game Passy.
Mhm.
So I feel like there's a lot of conversation right now with Sony being following trends that Microsoft is setting, but not like smashing beyond them.
For sure, because this is in line with I talked about the intro, right? But this is in line with Sony's strategy last year, I believe, when Microsoft made news that they bought Bethesda for 7 billion. Right? They went out and said, okay, let's make the deals that make sense for us. Right? We're going to go buy Bluepoint, a studio we've worked with a lot, and let's go buy Housemark. Right? Two fantastic developers who have done great things. Right? But they're not as flashy. It just feels, I think, to the average person, it feels like, wait, aren't those studios already owned by Sony? Right?
Yeah.
Um, and to contextualize this further, so deals were 3.6 billion, right? That's a far cry from 68.7 billion what Microsoft bought from Activision, for Activision, excuse me. This is more in line with Microsoft buying Minecraft for 2.5 billion. And I think some of the messaging early on here is similar too, where Microsoft didn't take Minecraft off of anywhere. You know what I mean? It
Right.
stayed. The cash cow stayed, right? And for good reason, right? And it seems so far that this is a similar deal for Sony, because if you go to Bungie's website, they have a helpful FAQ. I won't read all of it, but they do underscore some important things here. So, number one community, multi-platform. Destiny 2 will stay on all current platforms and expand to new platforms. Number two, self-published, creatively independent. Bungie maintains full creative control and publishing independence of the Destiny universe. And then number three, same game everywhere. Every player should have an amazing Destiny experience, no matter where you choose to play. So I think this is them learning from the hubbub of the last couple of years, right? Where everyone's like, "Is Elder Scrolls going to be exclusive? Like, what's happening to my games that I love?"
They're
They've
getting
gotten
out
ahead
ahead
of
of
this,
that.
yeah, which I very much appreciate from a communication standpoint. So, um, one of the other one, there's some really good information here that people can go and read. But one of the interesting ones that I think is potent is good for us to discuss. The question is, Bungie has future games in development. Will they now become PlayStation exclusives? And on Bungie's website, it says no. We want the worlds we are creating to extend to anywhere people play games. We will continue to be self-published, creatively independent, and will continue to drive one unified Bungie community. What do you guys make of that? Joe, we can start with you. This was not what I was expecting, personally.
Yeah. So across anything that I've seen about this so far, Bungie seems very, very dedicated to the messaging that they are staying independent, in control of their own stuff. That comes from from past relationships that perhaps didn't work out so well. And you have to wonder, like, what does that mean? What is Sony sort of getting out of this relationship if nothing changes for Bungie and they're 100% still the same, not changing anything? Why is Sony putting up all this kind of money? So even though it sounds very much like we don't have to worry right now, Destiny 2 is not going away for anybody. Um, there is still the possibility in the future that
Mhm.
either new IP or future Destiny expansions will have some sort of Sony friendly, Sony leaning, Sony exclusive type content.
Yeah. Miller, what do you think?
I think that Destiny 2 as a game and as a platform is so in the mix at this point of being a multi-platform title that it would be foolhardy to try to extricate it. And Sony would be better off making the money now as the owners of Bungie, right? Making the money that they're going to make, because Bungie makes a lot of money on Destiny 2 and all those Eververse items that you buy when you go in there, and the season passes and all that kind of stuff. Just letting it be is probably wise. I will say that one of the FAQs in there gave me pause a little bit when it asked about content exclusives for Witch Queen, and they were very clear of saying, like, there will be no content, there's no content that's just coming to Sony platforms for Witch Queen. That question was not specifically all Destiny 2. It was very specifically about the Witch Queen.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that was an oversight. Maybe they really did mean like all future expansions and all that kind of stuff. But in a deal this big, you would think the kind of words that they're using and the words they choose to use in an FAQ like that are very carefully chosen. Which is to say, I wouldn't be incredibly, they have at least 2 subsequent big expansions announced with Lightfall and the Final Shape coming in subsequent years here, not to mention all the many seasons that are going to be part of those individual years. After this deal closes, I think I would be a little surprised if there isn't some sort of treats in there for people who are playing on Sony platforms. But maybe not. Maybe they will clarify that further and be like, no, we didn't just mean Witch Queen. We're never going to do content that's exclusive to Sony anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, by the way, just as a historic footnote here, there used to be a relationship between Sony and Bungie in the early days of Destiny that had that happen a lot. If you've been playing Destiny for a long time, you will remember playing, and you'd sometimes get certain like items that were only available on Sony platforms, or they would be exclusive to Sony platforms for like a year or two before they went out to people who were playing on Xbox. I don't know. I guess I'd just be a little surprised if they didn't go back to something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Well, I to that other point that Jill was talking about, I mean, I think the broader, the new IP, there's a lot of weird pieces of information on the business side from Bungie in the last 3-4 years that were like announcements that happened and then we never got any real follow through on. And I'm now increasingly curious what's going on there, because there was a relatively huge influx of cash in 2018 where Bungie took some money from a Chinese internet company called NetEase that was supposedly to help establish additional teams to work on other IP. And there was also the announcement early last year that Bungie was enlarging their Washington State headquarters, as well as potentially opening an Amsterdam studio. That was also in part with the goal of like, we're going to do new IP. We're going to have a new non-Destiny game by 2025. Where this announcement about this Sony purchase leaves those pieces of information, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But they seem to be saying, at least on that FAQ, that those IP are, whatever future things they're doing are also going to be, at least they have the option to make them multi-platform. I mean, that's the
Right.
other maybe loophole of how they're communicating this stuff, where they talk about, they say Bungie has future games in development. Will they now become PlayStation exclusives? No, we want the worlds we are creating to extend to anywhere people play games.
Mm-hmm.
We will continue to be self-published, creatively independent, and will continue to drive one unified Bungie community. That feels like it's pretty ironclad in some ways, of saying like our new IP are going to go, they are not going to just be on PlayStation. But who knows the way that they try to like change that. Like we've certainly seen lots of businesses over the year make one announcement one year, and 2 or 3 years later, when the sting has left from the communities involved, they come out and say like, we originally said this, but upon increased reflection, we
Mm-hmm.
really think the best place to publish this game is on PlayStation platforms.
Which would fall in line then with the statement that they have the right to choose, right, where they publish. I think I wonder if this falls into the territory too, because after the Microsoft deal with Activision, it came out that, which I don't know if these reports are confirmed or not, but it came out that the next like 3 Call of Duties will be on PlayStation, right? Because of previous deals that were already signed.
Yeah.
There was a point last year where Microsoft and Bungie seemed to be palling up again, right? We had a ton of Destiny 2 stuff come to Game Pass, right? That was huge. That was one of their big things for Game Pass for the year. So I wonder if if any deals stem from that. But on the flip side of that, Joe brought up Spartacus or whatever the rumored Game Pass competitors from Sony is coming, right? I feel like, we see games come and go off Game Pass all the time, right? Like, if you're Sony, you can now be like, hey, the exclusive home of being able to stream or get Destiny in the way of Game Pass. Yeah. So, and that doesn't inherently take away access to Xbox users, right?
Yeah.
But it sweetens the pot for that deal, right? And you can get whatever the next expansion is past Witch Queen, 2 weeks early if you're on this, or blah blah blah. You know what I mean? There's plenty of incentives here to sweeten the deal without ever cutting off access to the people who are loyal fans on Xbox.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious, is there any other points we want to hit on before we take kind of a macro look at the industry now from this, which is always hard to do, right? But like, I think this is kind of what I was afraid of. I don't know if what camp y'all are in when it comes to consolidation and oligopolies and stuff like that. But is there any other points you want to hit on from community standpoint, from a Bungie standpoint, that kind of stuff?
I mean, maybe the bridge into that conversation for me is just the idea that the industry, as it always has, is changing. What is being prioritized by the biggest players in this industry is changing. And what used to be exclusively about like being able to claim console supremacy is a much, much more complicated game than it used to be. And what I mean by that is that like a company like Sony and Microsoft, sure, they'd like to be able to say that they sold the most PlayStation 5s or Xbox Series X or whatever. But like the ecosystem is much more complex than that. As you brought up, the Game Pass thing, the entryway into much of gaming being around subscriptions and paying a monthly fee to access a bunch of different games. Like that's a experience that Sony is increasingly going to be pushing into to compete with Xbox about. There's just the overall like financial situation of like you're talking about huge, almost inconceivable amounts of money exchanging hands, and these really big companies making really big plays to remain the centerpiece players of this massive industry, right? And that's not always just about the console and how many units you've sold of the console. It's it very well may come down to the reality that like this is a good deal for Sony because Bungie just makes a lot of money. And if Bungie makes a lot of money, wherever they make that money and Sony's getting a portion of that money, then that's good for Sony. That bolsters their ability to continue being a major player, whether that money is made on PlayStation or not.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't. None of us here, I think, would claim to be business experts. We're approaching this from a perspective of like enthusiast gamers, and what this means for us. And it's certainly the first place most of our minds go, especially for somebody like me who's a Destiny player and likes playing with people who are on different platforms and all the new cross-play options. The first place your head goes is like the alarm of like, oh man, I think it would be really bad if Bungie games started after all this time. We finally get crossplay in this universe we've been playing in for a long time, and now this thing comes in that's gonna screw that up. That's where our heads go. But I don't think that's going to happen, at least not anytime soon. The longer term implications of Sony owning Bungie, that's a harder prognostication to make, I think. And to your point, I mean, I think there's a lot more to talk about just on what this as one more step means for what the industry is doing right now. And concerns I think that we could have, even not from a business perspective, from a enthusiast gamer perspective, about what these kinds of really big purchases mean.
Yeah, for sure. Jill, any thoughts on any of that, or anything you want to add here?
Yeah. Obviously, when you have Microsoft buying up all these things, the discussion that we had after Activision Blizzard was, is this becoming a trend? Is this something that starts the quote unquote arms race? And with this Bungie acquisition, it seems like that might be the path that we're going down. So you start wondering, like, okay, who are the major players out there that might get acquired? What does the future look like if only 2 or 3 companies own every
Everything.
single gaming company out there? And what do our games start to look like? What is, if there's no competition, what do prices start looking like? What, you know, from like an indie side, what does this do for indies who are looking to get more on these platforms? Or if they don't get on these platforms, do they never get seen again? I mean, luckily Steam is still out there so that they have that platform, but what if that becomes, you know, tied into all of this? There's a lot of things that I think up until this particular moment I wasn't that worried about, and now it starts swirling around in your head. Like, what does the future look like if this is really a situation where everybody's going to start snapping up everybody they can?
Yeah, I am very worried about what the company, and we talked about this during the Activision stuff. I am worried about the Netflixes, the Amazons, right? The players in this who desperately want to get in games, right? And have had multiple failed attempts, some successes with like New World and Amazon, right? But a lot of stuff. If we're teaching them that the entrance into this is IP snatch up, right? Which it's that's what it's starting, right? This is what's starting, right? That's when, and then Amazon's like, great, we got money, we got capital for that. You know, let's go grab like X, Y, and Z, right? Netflix is doing the same thing. That's where this arms race kind of scares me, because I don't think I can't speak for the internet at large here, wouldn't dare try. But I don't think I took Phil Spencer's comments maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago as seriously as I should have, when he talked about how Xbox is not competing with Amazon or with Sony anymore, right? It's competing with Amazon, it's competing with Netflix. And this feels like Sony is starting to feel like the streaming wars, right? Where IP is king. IP has always been king in this industry too, but now that the tech gap has kind of shrunk between the consoles, right? It's what do you have for games even more now, or what do you have for your streaming services even more so now? And I think this becomes a little clearer when we do hear if and when Sony is actually working on a competitor. They have to be at this point, right?
In terms of a subscription service, you mean?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
In a Game Pass competitor, I think if and when they announce whatever that is, this becomes clearer, right? Because then you can say your streaming service is the best streaming service, and like,
Right.
you know, obviously they know, I mean, they're competitors, right? But Sony's knows at least there is some success in this Game Pass business, right? They want to see if they can do that themselves here. And but I mean, like, and like for the Netflix model too, or the Prime model, right? It's like, yo, I can go watch The Lighthouse and a Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and then switch over to Prime Gaming, right, and go play, an EA game, right? Like that's the kind of thing where it's like it's already there, to that infrastructure is there, and it scares me. I'll say two things and then I'll stop. But like that scares me, just like having these silos, right, where everything is owned. But also too, it's hard for me too, because I have to imagine this is a benefit to the developers, right? Having that be the basically the not the mothership in a creative sense, but like in a way where it's like, okay, I know my benefits are locked in. We're not independent anymore. Like I know, I know where my paycheck is coming from. We have certain guarantees with that. Nothing's guaranteed, but like it's a little safer in that way. And maybe that's naive of me, but like, I hope that's because, like we said, Bungie like craved independence, right? It got independence from Activision. Sony had to throw something at them to say, okay, this is worth not jeopardizing that, but having someone to talk to about our games and that kind of stuff. So
I think it seems like they threw to them, because you're right, they had to have offered something that were pretty seemingly beneficial terms, and I guarantee you the contracts that were put together are so complicated they would make all of our heads swim.
yeah,
But at least on the surface, what was there was that creative independence, right? The ability to continue self-publishing. And yes, you're getting financial backing now from Sony. You're also giving a portion of your the money that you make to the people who own you, but like you're making your own choices about how to do it. That is how it appears to be on paper. My concerns about this stuff, after a lot of years of covering what initially, we would hear about announcements of like, this studio has been purchased by this company, right? And it always, at first glance, it always seems like it's like, oh, this seems like it's a good deal for everybody. Cut to 5 years later, and that studio has lost half of its employees. It doesn't have any studio identity anymore, and eventually it gets shuttered,
yeah,
right? These are the things that happen. Time can do a lot of things, right? And once somebody owns another company, they ultimately can make a lot of decisions about what happens there and how to finance them, and all kinds of things. So my hope, certainly as somebody who's followed Bungie games for a long time, is that they are safe, that their games are safe. They're free to do what they are saying they're free to do, which is to self-publish, have creative freedom, all that kind of stuff. But I don't know the fine print, and none of us likely will see that contract or understand it enough to be able to say, like, yeah, but what happens when, let's say 5 years from now, Sony is in a terrible financial situation?
mm-hmm.
What do they do? Do they shutter Bungie because that's a big expenditure? Can they do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are that's where my head goes, is like long-term issues. I think in the immediate term, people who play Destiny should probably just calm down. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
That would be my best guess, is that not a lot's gonna change, because Sony wouldn't have made this purchase if they didn't like the money Bungie was bringing in.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Do you all have, Jill, do you have any parting thoughts before we
Um,
say goodbye? Or anything else
just
you want to cover, I should say?
just to sort of like have some like positivity on the immediate front too, not just not to be worried, but also like uh obviously there are good things happening here for Bungie. Hopefully they are getting a little bit of that Sony cash. And hopefully that helps them make perhaps whatever a new IP that they are interested in, and that they can diversify and not just be the everybody thinks of Destiny 2 as their thing, instead of, and maybe they'll expand and become bigger and have all these great, amazing experiences to offer. Um, Hopefully in the future, if they don't, maybe if, however the contracts are written, we don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, like it sounds like they're getting a lot of independence. Hopefully there's some version here where if they don't, they've been through the ringer before. They've been through this before where they were locked into contracts that they didn't particularly love. So
Mhm.
hopefully they baked it into this current situation where if they don't like what's going on, they can walk and become independent. And we'll see if that, we'll see how time, like Miller puts like a great point out there. Time is really going to tell here.
Mhm. For sure. And to go off that point of excitement, right? Sony has some amazing engines that they can offer them now, right? Like the Sony has really shown, and PlayStation brand has shown that like immersive story experiences all the way through, and they have some of the best of those of the last decade, plus. Uh, Hopefully that's nothing but a benefit to the awesome team at Bungie. But I think oligopolies are bad just in general. So this makes me nervous in that sense. But Miller, do you have any parting thoughts before we say goodbye here? Or we cover it all?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Consolidations make me nervous.
Yeah.
As a gamer, we've been around long enough to be able to say that like there's a lot of times that we've lost great studios. Studios that were doing great work, that were really doing interesting things, and they got purchased and things went wrong, right? Yeah. So it makes me nervous. There's nothing somebody could say to me. I think Sony and Bungie here are saying all the right things to make me as confident as I can be that this is a good deal and it's not going to turn out to be terrible for the people who I care about, which is people who are gaming and enjoying the hobby.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that they could say that would make me not be nervous about an announcement of this scale for a developer who I followed for this many years and whose games I really like. It's another one where I find myself, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope for the best. And I really do. I think, to Jill's point, I think there's reason for optimism. Certainly there's things that Bungie can get out of this. There's opportunities that can arise. And I hope that's what happens. I don't think you can follow the industry for as long as most of us have and not hear about a big purchase like this and not be a little bit trepidatious.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. Jill, any parting thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, I think we covered it all. Let's look forward to hopefully more news and figuring out what all this means, big and small.
I don't know if these devs and publishers know about that. February's got a lot of games. Like this doesn't need to all come out in the first 60 days of the year, right? Give us some breathing room, for God's sakes. Yeah, we'll wait and see. That's all we can do. And it's if nothing else, it's an interesting year so far. So we talked about a little bit on this, but if you're curious about our thoughts on like Activision Blizzard and some of the other stuff, go to youtube.com/GameInformer, GameInformer.com on all the acquisition news, right? And we had a podcast about it 2 weeks ago. I'm sure we will talk about it on this week's GI show, but and we'll keep discussing it as things become clear to us. But yeah, wild times we live in, friends. So thank you. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be good to one another, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.